On the afternoon of August 10, 1901, two English schoolteachers walked into the gardens of Versailles and, by their own account, walked out of their own century. Their names were Charlotte Dawn Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain. Both were respected academics at Oxford. Neither had any interest in the supernatural. They were looking for the Petit Trianon, the small palace where Marie Antoinette once escaped the suffocating rituals of court life. They never found the path they were looking for. Instead, they described a heaviness settling over the gardens. The trees stopped moving. The light went flat, they said, like a painting rather than a place. And then they began encountering people, men in long green coats and three-cornered hats, a man with a scarred, pockmarked face, sitting near a garden pavilion, and finally a woman sketching on the grass in an old-fashioned dress and wide, pale hat. The two women walked past all of them. They spoke to some of them, and only later, comparing notes, did they realize that neither of them had seen a single thing that belonged to the year 1901. You have probably heard that time travel is impossible, that it belongs to fiction, to films, to the imagination. But the strange truth is that the people who study this most seriously are not filmmakers. They are physicists, and the equations they work with do not forbid time travel at all. Moberly and Jourdain spent 10 years quietly investigating what they had seen. They went back to the archives. They found records of Versailles staff uniforms that matched the greencoats' uniforms that had not been worn since the 1790s. They found accounts of a court figure with a badly scarred face, a man who had contracted smallpox in 1789, and the woman sketching on the grass matched contemporary descriptions of Marie Antoinette herself. In 1911, they published their account under false names in a book called ************************************************ An Adventure******. The scholarly world was merciless. Skeptics argued the two women had simply wandered into a costumed rehearsal. The wealthy estate Robert de Montesquieu was known to stage elaborate period tableaus at Versailles around that time. It is a reasonable explanation. It has never been proven. What it does not explain is why two careful, sober academics were willing to destroy their own professional reputations rather than take the story back. Were Moberly and Jourdain confused tourists? Or did the summer of 1901 briefly touch the summer of 1789? Now here is where this story gets complicated. Because for every case that resists explanation, there is another that dissolves the moment you look closely, and if you want to understand time travel seriously, you have to be willing to watch one fall apart. In June of 1950, according to a story that has circulated for decades, a man appeared in the middle of Times Square in New York City. He was roughly 30 years old, wearing a black 19th-century frock coat, a stovepipe hat, and mutton chop sideburns. He looked terrified. He stared up at the electric lights and the traffic, stepped into the street, and was struck and killed by a taxi. The story says the coroner searched his pockets and found copper coins no longer in circulation, a bill for the care of a horse and carriage, and business cards printed with the name Rudolph Fentz. It says a police captain traced the name and found a Rudolph Fentz who had vanished from New York in 1876 at the age of 29. It is one of the most repeated time travel cases in the world. It has been printed in newspapers on 4 continents, and it is fiction. In 2000, the researcher Chris Aubeck tracked the story to its actual source, a short story called I'm Scared, written by Jack Finney and published in Collier's magazine in 1951. Every detail, the coins, the frock coat, the taxi, came from a piece of published fiction that somebody, somewhere, began retelling as fact. That matters, because most time travel stories are exactly this, fiction that lost its label. And once you strip those away, the ones left standing become far more interesting. Which brings us to the case that nobody has been able to explain away. On November 2, 2000, someone began posting on an internet forum devoted to time travel. He used the name John Titor. He claimed to be a soldier from the year 2036, sent back to 1975 to recover an IBM 5100 computer, a machine his era needed because it could read obsolete programming languages that the world had forgotten how to translate. He said he had stopped in the year 2000 for personal reasons. Over the following 4 months, Titor posted constantly. He described his time travel device in technical detail. a gravity distortion unit built around two microsingularities mounted in the back of a 1967 Chevrolet. He posted photographs and diagrams. He answered questions patiently, sometimes for hours, and he made predictions. He described an America torn apart by civil conflict beginning in 2004. He described a global war by 2015. He described a world in which the cities had emptied and people had gone back to living in small agricultural communities. Then, in March of 2001, he announced he was going home, and the posts simply stopped. None of his major predictions came true. Investigators have since pointed toward a family in Florida as the likely authors, though nothing has ever been established beyond dispute. Whoever John Titor was, he understood something about time travel that most hoaxers never grasp, that the details you refuse to explain are more convincing than the ones you do. But while a man on a forum was inventing a time machine, actual physicists were quietly discovering that time travel might not require inventing anything at all. In 1949, the mathematician Kurt Gödel gave Albert Einstein a birthday present. The two men were colleagues at Princeton, and Gödel had spent months working through Einstein's own field equations. What he found was a solution, a mathematically valid universe, rotating slowly, in which a traveler could fly in a wide enough loop and arrive back at their own past. Not metaphorically, physically, a closed loop in time, permitted by the same equations that describe our gravity, our orbits, our falling apples. Einstein accepted the mathematics. He simply did not believe the universe was built that way. But the door Gödel opened never closed. Physicists now use the term closed time-like curves without embarrassment. And at the University of Connecticut, the physicist Ronald Mallet has spent much of his career designing a device intended to produce one using a ring of circulating laser light to twist space so severely that time itself bends into a loop. Mallet is open about why. His father died of a heart attack at 33, when Mallet was 10 years old. He has spent a lifetime on the physics of time travel because he wants to go back and warn him. Whether the design can ever work remains fiercely disputed. But note the limitation Mallet himself accepts. A machine like his could only send you back as far as the moment it was switched on, not further. Which means that if time travel is ever achieved, no one can reach us here unless a machine already exists. Which brings us to the strangest experiment ever conducted on this question. On June 28, 2009, the physicist Stephen Hawking held a party at the University of Cambridge. There was champagne, there were balloons, there was a banner. Everything was prepared perfectly, and there were no guests, because Hawking had not sent the invitations yet. He sent them the following day deliberately, publicly, with the exact coordinates and the exact time, as an invitation to anyone from the future who might one day read them. Nobody came. Hawking called it experimental evidence that time travel is impossible. But there is another reading, and it is the one that should keep you awake. Physicists describe something called the Novikov self-consistency principle, the idea that the universe will not permit a contradiction. Under that principle, a time traveler cannot change the past, because the past already includes everything they did. Which means the empty room proves nothing about whether they can come, only that they didn't. If you found this worth your time, subscribe. There is a great deal more that history has not finished explaining.